There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels alive, like the world itself is holding its breath. Some people fear that silence. Others crave it. They walk alone through crowded cities, invisible to most, yet more connected to life than anyone around them. They sit by themselves in cafes, by the window, lost in thought, not lonely, but found. To them, solitude isn't isolation, it's oxygen. But here's the strange part. Society calls them withdrawn, cold, detached, as if peace and distance were symptoms of something broken, as if choosing yourself means rejecting the world. What if it's the opposite? What if solitude isn't an escape, but a return? You see, behind every person who loves being alone, there's a story. A storm they learned to survive by finding stillness inside it. A childhood where noise meant danger. A world that demanded too much, too fast. And so they built a sanctuary within a space where thoughts could breathe and emotions could unfold without judgment. Psychologists call it high introspection or self-referential processing. Philosophers call it the meeting with the self. But the truth is simpler. When you spend enough time in silence, you stop fearing it and start hearing yourself. Maybe that's why solitude feels like home to some minds. Because in the quiet, they don't have to perform. They don't have to chase validation or wear masks that please the world. They simply are. But here's the revelation. The people who are most comfortable being alone are often the ones who understand connection the deepest. Because they've learned that love, peace, and meaning don't begin out there. They begin in here. So the next time you see someone alone, don't mistake their silence for sadness. Don't confuse their distance for indifference. They might just be exploring the rarest place a human can go, the depths of their own mind. And from that silence, they rise differently, clearer, stronger, unshakable. Because sometimes, being alone isn't loneliness. It's freedom. Chapter 1. The Silent Pull. There's a strange kind of silence that doesn't feel lonely. It feels magnetic. It draws certain people in, like a secret language only they can hear. For most, silence is uncomfortable. It's the space where thoughts get too loud, where time slows, where you can't hide from yourself. That's why so many fill their days with noise notifications, conversations, endless motion. Because the quiet exposes something raw. But for others, silence is not something to escape, it's something to return to. It's not a void, it's a landscape, vast, alive, and full of meaning. They feel at home in it, as though solitude has a pulse, and they've learned how to sync with it. This is the silent pull, the mysterious gravity that solitude has on certain minds. To understand it, we first have to understand the world that surrounds it. We live in an age of constant connection. The average person spends more time staring into screens than into faces. We are surrounded by voices, yet starved of quiet. The world equates activity with purpose, as if being still means being left behind. And yet, there are those who feel drained by the very noise others thrive on. They don't withdraw out of fear, but out of necessity to breathe, to think, to simply be. Their silence isn't an act of rejection, but of preservation. Imagine a lake. When the surface is still, you can see straight through to the bottom clear, undistorted. But when the surface is restless, every ripple hides what lies beneath. That's what solitude does for the mind. It stills the water so you can finally see yourself. Psychologists might call it self-regulation or reflection. But for those who live it, it's simpler. It's peace. It's the moment when your thoughts stop chasing and start settling. The silent pull is not just about being alone. It's about remembering who you are when no one is looking. When there's no performance, no expectation, no audience. And here's the paradox. The more comfortable someone becomes with silence, the more vividly they perceive the world around them. In quiet moments, they notice details others miss: the hum of electricity in a room, the flicker of emotion in a stranger's eyes, the rhythm of their own breathing. It's as if solitude sharpens the senses instead of dulling them. This is where our story begins, not in loneliness, but in the pull towards something deeper. Because behind that stillness lies a hidden world, one that reveals how some people's peace begins where everyone else's comfort ends. The question is, what exactly happens inside the mind that learns to find home in silence? And why does it feel so right, even when the world doesn't understand it? Chapter 2: The Misunderstood Ones. In a world built on constant conversation, silence often feels suspicious. If you're quiet, people wonder what's wrong. If you prefer your own company, they call you distant, strange, even broken. From a young age, we're taught that being social means being normal, that belonging is proof of worth. So when someone chooses solitude, society doesn't quite know what to make of it. They're labeled as withdrawn, antisocial, detached, but those labels reveal more about our fear of stillness than about the person themselves. Because in truth, solitude challenges the world's favorite illusion, that constant connection equals happiness. Think about it. From childhood, we're rewarded for showing up, speaking up, being seen. We learn that silence has no place in a room that demands attention. But some people, the quiet ones, the observers, the deep thinkers, have always known something different. They don't need the crowd to feel alive. They don't measure meaning by volume. While others chase validation, they listen inward, tuning into subtler frequencies of thought and emotion. It's not that they can't connect. It's that they connect differently. Yet the misunderstanding runs deep. When someone disappears for a while, we assume they're sad. When they say no to social plans, we think they're rejecting us. But sometimes, that absence isn't a withdrawal, it's a reset. It's how they refill what the noise drains away. The world often forgets that energy flows in two directions. Some people recharge through interaction, others through introspection, and neither is wrong. They're just opposite sides of the same human coin. To love being alone isn't to reject humanity. It's to understand it more deeply. Because solitude doesn't erase connection, it refines it. It teaches discernment, who truly brings peace and who only brings noise. Those who embrace solitude learn something most overlook: that attention is a form of love. And when you give all your attention away to the world, without saving any for yourself, something inside begins to fade. So perhaps these misunderstood ones aren't detached at all. Maybe they're simply fluent in a quieter language, one that values meaning over volume, presence over popularity. They remind us that the measure of a life isn't how often you're seen, but how deeply you can see. And in that silence, a new understanding begins to take shape. That solitude isn't a symptom to fix, but a truth to explore. If you're enjoying this video so far, go ahead and click the subscribe button below. You can even click on our profile image to explore more of our past content. There's plenty waiting for you. Chapter 3: The Origins of Stillness. Every love begins somewhere, even the love of solitude. No one simply wakes up one day and decides they'd rather be alone. It starts slowly, shaped by moments, by the texture of early life, by the noise that once felt too loud to bear. For some, stillness was a refuge, a room of their own in a house full of chaos. The only place where they could breathe, think, or feel without interruption. For others, it was how they learned safety not through the comfort of company, but through the quiet certainty of control. When the world felt unpredictable, silence became a promise. Nothing can hurt me here. In psychology, we often talk about adaptations, the ways the mind learns to protect itself. Solitude can be one of them. It's the mind's way of saying, here, in this quiet, I am safe enough to exist as I am. But over time, what begins as protection can evolve into preference. stillness stops being a shield and becomes a sanctuary. Think of it like a tree growing in a windy field. At first, it bends with every gust, trying not to break. But with time, its roots grow deeper, stronger, learning how to hold ground even when the air moves violently around it. That's what solitude does to the soul. It grounds you in yourself. Many of those who love being alone aren't avoiding others. They're simply returning to a space that once kept them alive. Silence became their first teacher. It taught them how to observe instead of react, how to think before they speak, how to listen to what's not being said. There's a quiet wisdom born from those early lessons. Because once you've learned to find peace in the absence of noise, you stop depending on the world to give it to you. You start carrying it within you. And that's the paradox of solitude. It begins as an escape, but transforms into a homecoming. A place where the mind stops defending itself and starts discovering itself. When we talk about people who love being alone, we're not just talking about a lifestyle, we're tracing a lineage of stillness. Every quiet person carries the echo of that first moment they realized peace was possible. And for them, silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the memory of safety, the return to self, the beginning of clarity. Because sometimes, the stillness we choose as adults is the same stillness that once saved us. Chapter 4: The Science and the Soul. We often talk about solitude as a feeling peaceful, heavy, healing, or haunting. But beneath that feeling lies something far more intricate. The love of being alone is not just emotional, it's neurological. Science tells us that the brain of someone who enjoys solitude works a little differently. When the world grows quiet, most minds grow restless. The so-called default mode network begins to spin, filling silence with worry or distraction. But in solitude seekers, that same network often comes alive with integration, connecting dots between memories, experiences, and ideas. It's where insight forms. To them, silence isn't the absence of activity, it's the mind at its most awake. It's in those moments of solitude that creativity sparks, patterns emerge, and problems untangle. Einstein once said he thought best in solitude not because he was escaping the world, but because he was listening to it in ways others couldn't. But science only explains half the story. Because solitude isn't just about how the brain processes quiet, it's about how the soul receives it. Philosophers call it the meeting with the self. It's that rare space where thought and emotion stop arguing, where you see yourself clearly not as who you're supposed to be, but as who you already are. For centuries, monks, poets, and thinkers sought that same meeting place through meditation, long walks, or simple silence. They understood what modern life often forgets, that solitude is not a pause from life, it is life, seen without the noise. And yet, the soul's work in solitude is not easy. In the beginning, you face yourself, the parts you ignore when you're busy. That's why silence feels sharp at first. It cuts through distraction and makes you see what you've been avoiding. But stay long enough, and something changes. The discomfort fades. The noise inside you settles. And from that stillness, a new kind of understanding rises, quiet but undeniable. That's the paradox of solitude. It feels empty, but it's where fullness begins. The mind integrates. The heart recalibrates. The self realigns. It's as if the brain and the soul, logic and spirit meet halfway, shaking hands in the quiet. And when they do, you realize solitude isn't a sign of distance from the world. It's evidence of connection to something deeper, more ordered, more alive. Because in the end, the science of solitude explains how it works. But the soul of it, that's why it matters. It's the bridge between knowing and being, between thought and truth, between the mind that needs peace and the heart that finally finds it. And from that silence, a new voice begins to emerge, your own, At some point, every journey inward must turn outward again, because solitude, for all its beauty, was never meant to be a hiding place. It was meant to be a mirror to show you who you are when the world falls away. You've learned the language of silence. You've heard your own thoughts echo without fear. Now, it's time to carry that peace back into the noise. The first step is presence. Learn to stand still, even when the world moves fast. When you walk through a crowded room, breathe deeply. Remind yourself that your calm is not fragile, it's your anchor. The second is clarity. When you stop chasing every sound, you start hearing what truly calls you. Not every demand deserves your energy. Not every voice deserves your response. Choose carefully. What you give attention to becomes your world. The third is connection. Solitude teaches you how to listen now. Use that gift to truly hear others. When you speak, let it come from the same quiet place that taught you peace. Because the ones who understand silence often bring the gentlest strength to those who fear it. And finally, creation. What you've gathered in stillness was never meant to stay hidden. The calm you've built, the clarity you've earned, the truths you've uncovered, they are seeds. Plant them in the world through your work, your words, your kindness. That's how solitude becomes light. You see, the goal was never to escape the world. It was to return to it whole. Solitude is where you remember what matters. The world is where you live it. So walk back into the noise with quiet eyes. Carry your stillness like a lantern, because while others search for peace in the world, you have found the world within peace. And in that silence, you finally understand. You were never alone. You were simply coming home.